Love. It's the greatest of all things. So many people have written about love, attempting to define it or express it over our lives and beyond. And I'm not sure anyone gets quite as close as Paul does in the Bible. Now, obviously, when you think of love in the Bible and Paul, 1 Corinthians 13 comes to mind. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy or boast. It is not proud or self-serving. I mean, just hearing these words, it transports you to a funeral or of a loved one or a wedding or in the arms of someone you love. Paul gets it when it comes to writing about love. And he does it again to the church in Philippi. In verse 9, "And this is my prayer, that your love may overflow more and more with knowledge and full insight, to help you determine what is best, so that in the day of Christ you may be pure and blameless, having produced the harvest of righteousness that come through Jesus Christ for the glory and praise of God." For me, there is no one artist or theologian that comes as close to defining love as Paul does, except maybe Mumford & Sons. Mumford & Sons, it is a rock band. Noel and I went and saw them last year in Charlottesville at JPJ. They have a song called "Sigh No More." It goes like this: "Love does not betray, dismay, or enslave you. It sets you free." I love that run. Love does not betray, dismay, or enslave you. It sets you free. Free from anger, free from depressed thoughts, free from agony or anxiety or abuse, free from feeling like life has no purpose or meaning. Love sets you free. And this is what Paul is trying to tell the good people of the church in Philippi. I mean, the context of this passage is very important. He's having a conversation about Jesus coming back in their lifetime and how they should be acting before Jesus does. This is something we don't focus on or talk about enough in New Testament studies. But Paul, he literally thought Jesus was going to come back in his lifetime to redeem all of earth. So he wrote about it. Be prepared. Stand guard. You won't know the time, you won't know the place, but you got to be ready. And he's doing it here in Philippians 1. Verse 6, "I am confident of this, that the one who began a good work among you will bring it to completion by the day of Jesus Christ." And Paul is confident. Jesus is returning. We have to keep the good work that was started by Jesus. We got to keep it going. We can't stop. But there one thing we have to make note of. Paul was wrong. Jesus didn't come back. I mean, not like he said he would. I mean, we still believe, Christendom still believes Jesus is coming back to fully redeem earth. But 2,000 years have gone by. Jesus hasn't returned. I don't think we should let that depress us. God is still very present. God is still doing good work among us and through the church. We just have to take heed of Paul's earlier advice and keep the good work going. And that's how he opens his letter. I mean, this is Philippians chapter 1. You got to stay prepared, church. Keep the good work of Jesus Christ going. And I am confident that you can do this. And then he writes what I think is probably the most significant portion, at least in this chapter, if not all of Paul's theology entirely. As you prepare for Christ's return, you have to do this one thing: love. This is amazing to me. I mean, he is talking to the in-group of Christians. These are the followers of Jesus who believe that the world is going to be redeemed. They believe the wars are eventually going to stop. The oppression is going to stop. Paul and his followers, they could respond in all kinds of ways. There is a lot of naysayers There are a lot of people who are telling them what they're doing doesn't count or matter, or it should not even be taking place. They could respond with a tremendous amount of anger. And yet Paul says this, and this is my prayer, that your love may overflow more and more with knowledge and full insight. I mean, you could summarize Paul in Philippians 1 like this. Christ is coming. You need to keep the good work going. You need to make sure that you are pure and blameless. You need to produce a harvest of righteousness. You need to make sure that God continually is praised in all of this. And here's how you can do all of these things together. Love. In 2016, my grandmother died of ovarian cancer. She battled it for 4 years. The time came for her funeral, and the pastor was out on a family vacation and could not return. So my dad, who is a pastor, and myself, we conducted the funeral. I did most of the heavy lifting in terms of scripture and talking about life after death, but it was my dad who offered the memories and the eulogy. For anyone who has ever tried to speak at their parents' funeral, this is extremely difficult. So my dad chose to write a letter to his mom, my grandmother, and then also his dad. He eulogized about how he understood love in his life because of the way that his parents, my grandparents, demonstrated agape love. I want to come back to that word. Grandma was an encourager. She would sit next to you on the couch and just kind of pat the cushion for you to come over. She would hold your hand and she would just listen. After you would tell her all that you wanted to say and then all the things you didn't know you needed to say, she would just look at you and bless the moment with an encouraging word. Now, my dad tells the story that one day he was in college and he and some of his friends came by the house and they announced to his parents that they were going to ride their motorcycles to California. This is in Nashville, Tennessee. So they expected to hear, "You're crazy. No way. How foolish is that? You could be killed." But that's not what Grandma said. She just smiled at my dad and said, "I think that's great, Bill. Just think of the memories that you'll make." Grandma never took life away from you. She gave you the freedom to dream and then was a support to help those experiences come to life. She always encouraged, always loved. This is agape love. By the way, in the Greek language, there are 6 different words for love. 3 of them are used in the Bible. Eros is a sexual, romantic kind of love. Phileo is like Philadelphia. It is the city of brotherly love. Well, that is also a word for love, for brotherly friendship love. But then there's also agape, a godly, universal love. In Philippians 1, Paul tells the church that they have to have an agape love, a universal love for all of God's things and all of God's people. Grandma had this. She knew that love does not betray, dismay, or enslave. She knew that love sets you free. She never made my dad feel like he was forbidden to be the person God made him to be. She instilled in him the love of God, the saving love of Jesus, and the freedom to follow the Spirit's call wherever it leads. And it helped set my dad free to love and to become the person of God he was made to be. Grandma loved in a way that set you free. And so my dad's eulogy addressed this kind of love. And then he turned to his dad, my granddad, and he reflected on the ways in which my granddad loved and supported Grandma as she was dying of cancer. Papa did it all. He cooked, he cleaned, he fed, he changed colostomy bags, he drove to and from doctor's offices and chemo treatments. He learned the medication as well as anyone could. He learned the side effects of what would happen if he didn't do it exactly right. He got up at all hours of the night, Papa was as selfless and as loving of a husband as you could be. He showed us, too, what agape love can look like between two people. Agape love sets you free. It is a universal godly love. Papa never saw Grandma's illness as something that would enslave him. He loved her every day in spite of the cancer. It really was something holy to see. There's a Christmas message in this for us today. The love that God brings to the world through Jesus Christ is an agape, universal love. The Christ mystery does not betray, dismay, or enslave. The Christ mystery sets us all free. And this is the message the church needs to hear, that love is universal. It does not betray, dismay, or enslave. It sets all people free. This is Paul's message to the church in Philippi, that you have work to do, church, but that work can be captured in your efforts of love. And the same is true 2,000 years later for First Baptist Waynesboro and all of God's church in the world today. Now, I learned recently that it wasn't until the 13th century that we really started to celebrate Christmas with all of the pomp and circumstance that we do it today. For over 1,000 years, the big Christian feast of our faith was not Christmas. It was Easter. Now, Easter is still very, very important in terms of Christianity. But honestly, it's nothing like we celebrate Christmas. I mean, you have a week when it comes to Easter. We call it Holy Week. But when it comes to Christmas, I mean, in my lifetime, it has eaten up Thanksgiving, and this year it has eaten up Halloween. It is 3 months long in terms of the ways in which Christians celebrate Christmas. And I'm not against it. I absolutely love it. But it didn't used to be that way. Christmas was not a popular holiday for 1,000 years of Christianity. But now it is. Why? Well, apparently, St. Francis of Assisi was the one who brought it out of the shadows, and it circumvented Easter in the early 1200s. And it was a theological reasoning that made him do this. He was deeply moved by God's universal love. Now, we all know the story of Easter and the message of the death and resurrection of Jesus. And by no means was St. Francis downplaying the significance of those events. But in his mind, there is no Easter. There is no crucifixion without the incarnation. To him, Jesus is coming into the world. It shows us an Emmanuel that no other holiday or Christian expression can touch. God's love is so grand, so universal. Not only did God create everything, God's love was so palpable that the creator of all things joined us in that creation. I mean, the word Emmanuel means God with us. I mean, St. Francis was so moved by this theological declaration that he wanted the season of Christmas to dazzle. And so if God is coming as Emmanuel, we need to show the world what that can look like. And for St. Francis, God coming into the world is captured in the first chapter of John, where we see that the light of the world comes and walks among us. John 1:3-5 says this: "What has come into being, in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome it." St. Francis took this seriously, believing that Christ's light was in all things. Agape love for St. Francis was that the light of God is in all people. So at Christmas, it was important for him that the church showcase the power of this light. It needed to outshine the darkness that is around us. So you know what he did? He strung lights on trees in 1200. Apparently, this is why we still do that today. We light trees and bushes and mantles and wreaths and street lights and decorations because we are declaring as Christians to the world. We are trying to tell everyone that gazes upon that light that we are celebrating and showing off that Christ's light is in all things and it outshines the darkness. Christmas lights, they celebrate agape love. And so we put them on everything because they are in everything. So my challenge to you is put as many Christmas lights out as you can. Get the really ugly blow-up animals. Get the cartoon characters. Get the colored lights on bushes. Whatever you need to feel that the light inside of you can be birthed into the world. That is what Christmas celebrates, that the light that is in everything, which is the Christ light, is now available for the world to see. All of us carry the mystery of Christ's light in us. It's our job to shine it, and there is no better representation of that than at Christmas.